Ladies and gentlemen, I'll ask you to keep standing, please, for our Lord Mayor, Councillor James Price.
Thank you very much. I would like to welcome you all. I know there are various dignitaries, one of whom is the Deputy Lord Lieutenant, who's my neighbour. Nice to see you here. I don't have a full list of all the dignitaries here, but I know we have the MP, Shadow Cabinet Minister Annalise, who's going to be speaking later. And I'm delighted that we are going to be able to give two freedoms of the city today to very well-deserved both individual and entities. So I welcome you, and I would now like to proceed without any further delay to the conferment of freedom of the city to Baroness O'Grady, and I would like to invite the Leader of the Council, Susan Brown, to propose.
I'm glad you've all been allowed to sit down. So, Deputy Lieutenant, Lord Mayor, City Sheriff, Honourable Recorder, Under Sheriff of the County, Member of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. If you're not covered by any of those, you should probably leave now, but I feel it's a pretty exhaustive list. As a proud trade unionist and a proud councillor for Wood Farm, which is part of the Churchill ward, it is my honour and privilege to propose that inspiring daughter of our city, Baroness Frances O'Grady of Upper Holloway and Wood Farm, to receive our highest honour, Freedom of the City of Oxford. Baroness O'Grady was born in Wood Farm and attended Wood Farm Primary School, and then went to Milham Ford School in Headington, now part of Oxford Brookes University's campus. Oxford's connections to Frances also include former Labour Oxford City Councillor Antonia Banks, who worked for her at the TUC as well. So we're doubly pleased to welcome you here today. After attending Manchester University, Baroness O'Grady moved to London, where she worked for the Transport and General Workers Union, the TGWU, and from 1994, the TUC. She became Deputy General Secretary of the TUC in 2003, and then in 2012 became General Secretary, the first woman ever to hold that post. In Oxford and Oxford City Council, we are proud of our support of trade unionism and the campaigns that they have fought on behalf of all of us for workers' rights and fair pay. These are causes that are dear to our hearts and ones we are also keen to support in practical ways, with good trade union relationships, which we're incredibly proud of in our city, and our campaigning for both wider trade union membership and also our work on the Oxford Living Wage. Oxford City Council set up the Oxford Living Wage at 90% of the London Living Wage after a motion to council by another Wood Farm connection, former Labour councillor Dr Joe McManus, who was a Wood Farm councillor, to recognise the very high cost of living in Oxford. I've enjoyed taking on the mantle of championing our Oxford Living Wage, and I'm delighted to say that we have now got over 120 employers in the city paying it, including ourselves and both universities. More are always welcome, and any employers here tonight who are not yet signed up to the Oxford Living Wage are welcome to see me afterwards. As we have seen over the last few months, with a rising cost of living that has far outstripped the increases in wages, the need for trade unions to represent their members has never been more important. During Frances's period in charge at the TUC, trade union membership rose, and in particular, more women joined trade unions. One of the many campaigns that the TUC successfully undertook under Frances's leadership was the challenge to Uber through the courts and ultimately to the Supreme Court to champion the rights of those exploited workers in the so-called gig economy. In 2019, as the pandemic turned all of our worlds upside down, Frances worked alongside the director of the CBI and the then Chancellor of the Exchequer, one Rishi Sunak, to develop together a furlough scheme that would sustain our economy and its workers, saving millions of jobs and preventing thousands of businesses from going under. In 2020, they came together again to develop the Job Support Scheme, the Bounce Back Loan Scheme and the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme, snappily titled and known as SIBLS. There is a lot there to learn about how the collaboration of business, government and trade unions can work to sustain both workers and business. What a pity our current Prime Minister has no experience of this. Oh no, hang on, wait. Anyway, we'll see if he does learn any lessons from that period. It was no surprise to hear that Baroness O'Grady was to be honoured with a peerage, but it was a huge delight to hear that she had chosen to recognise her origins in Wood Farm in her title. On the 9th of December 2022, as part of the 2022 Special Honours, she received a life peerage and was created Baroness O'Grady of Upper Holloway and Wood Farm, Oxford. Do come back and visit your old haunts in Wood Farm sometime soon. Be delighted to take you around. In offering her the freedom of our city, we are honouring the life work of Baroness Frances O'Grady on behalf of all workers, not just in our city, but as General Secretary of the TUC on a national scale. Frances, I'm delighted and honoured to move that you should be offered the freedom of our and your city of Oxford. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now like to invite Councillor Chris Jarvis to second the conferment. Thank you.
Deputy Lieutenant, Lord Mayor, City Sheriff, Honourable Recorder, Under Sheriff of the County, Member of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies, gentlemen and non-binary friends. You would struggle to find a more apt time for a local authority to confer an honour on a former General Secretary of the Trades Union Congress. In the last year, the trade union movement has been more present in the consciousness of the country than at any point in my lifetime. The latest reminder that organised labour is the last line of defence for working people against exploitation and destitution. Time and time again, we have seen that the trade union movement is the backbone of civil society and one of the most important defenders of liberty and freedom in our country and across the world. And Frances O'Grady is a towering and remarkable figure of that movement. Trade unionism has always been in her blood. Raised as a daughter of a British Leyland shop steward here in Cowley, her grandfather was also a founding member of the Irish Transport and General Workers Union. And after spending 10 years as Deputy General Secretary, she went on to make history when she became the first woman to be General Secretary of the TUC, a role she would stay in for another 10 years, squaring up against no less than 5 Prime Ministers. And as the public face of trade unionism for a decade, Frances has been a fierce, fearless and unrelenting advocate for working people. Her achievements in that time are long and numerous, and they are shaped by the profound social, political and economic changes the country has faced in that time. In the aftermath of the financial crash, Frances has been central to shifting the public narrative on the flawed logic of austerity and relentlessly defending workers against the scourges of precarious work, zero-hours contracts and fake self-employment. As the climate crisis has become ever more urgent, Frances has led the trade union movement at a time when it has become one of the most important voices calling for a just transition to a zero-carbon economy built around good, green, unionised jobs. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, the TUC was key to winning concessions from the government and protections for workers. There would have been no furlough scheme without the TUC, and there would have been no furlough scheme without the powerful negotiations of Frances O'Grady. Now, I think it's fair to say that most people with that string of achievements, that record of struggle behind them, would want a well-deserved break. But not Frances. She has now taken her years of campaigning into the House of Lords. And while some members of our upper chamber might not see their role as being particularly hands-on, Frances is different. Since becoming a peer, she has continued her lifelong commitment to fighting for the rights of working people and organised labour, making vital interventions on everything from anti-trade union laws to social care to post-Brexit legislation. Now, she might not remember this, but last year in my day job, I had the privilege of interviewing Frances ahead of her final TUC Congress as General Secretary. And talking about the latest anti-trade union laws, she told me that she has great faith in the strength and ingenuity of working people to stand up for their rights and to campaign for justice. That faith, that belief, has run like words in a stick of rock throughout her decades-long commitment to the trade union movement. And it's a faith that I think members of this council share. At its best, our city and this council is one which is pioneering, radical, and stands up against injustice. And as a child of Oxford, Frances has all those characteristics in spades. Pioneering in her approach to trade unionism, radical in the fight she fought for working people, and in every single day she dedicated to the trade union movement, she stood up to the injustice of exploitation, of low pay, and of workplace abuse. It's an honour to be second this conferment, and it's an honour to be part of a council that is granting freedom of the city to Baroness O'Grady.
I can see embarrassment over there. Anyhow, thoroughly well deserved. But we will now take a vote of members of the council. Only councillors vote on this. And then I'm going to invite Annalise Dodds MP to come and speak. But first, may I put it to the councillors, those in favour, please, of this conferment? Those against? Abstentions? Unanimous. Congratulations. Annalise, please.
Thank you very much indeed. And can I say what an immense honour and privilege it is to be able to say just a few words of congratulation to someone I'm very proud to call my friend, as well as a truly amazing advocate for working people, as we've already heard, Baroness O'Grady. I know that Frances is very proud of her links with Oxford. Of course, that has just been recognised by all of our councillors, to whom I'm so grateful. And I have to say, just as with the leader of the City Council, I was delighted when Baroness O'Grady decided to name Wood Farm in her title. I have to say, though, I can't be the only Oxford person who thought she'd got the spelling of Holloway wrong. As was mentioned before, of course, Frances came from a strong tradition of trade unionism. We've already heard about that from those conferring this wonderful honour of freedom of our city. And I would just say, I understand that Frances's trade unionism and commitment to supporting workers started at really a very young age. I'm sure many of us have heard the stories about Frances, along with another amazing Oxford born and bred woman, Val Smith, in Marks and Spencer's in Oxford, working together, particularly on pay terms and conditions from that employer in our city. And of course that began a life of commitment to working people. We've already heard of some of the many achievements of Baroness O'Grady from previous speakers, but I just wanted to focus on two that haven't been mentioned. I think very often we imagine now in our country that having a national minimum wage is a very natural thing, that of course we would want to have a floor below which people's wages cannot fall. Of course, as Baroness O'Grady saw time and time again, there was huge resistance to putting in place that national minimum wage. It wasn't always viewed even as a priority for the trade union movement. Sometimes in those previous years, it was often viewed as a women's issue. But Frances championed that national minimum wage and those enormous gains, pulling thousands upon thousands of low-paid workers out of poverty, owe a huge debt of gratitude to her work on that incredibly important intervention. Another one that I would mention, but with a feeling of certainly bittersweetness in my heart, is that of Union Learn. Again, something that Baroness O'Grady worked incredibly hard to put into place, which enabled thousands of working people to access skills when they would never have had that chance before. I say that's a bittersweet thing to remember because, of course, it is still scandalously scrapped, not put back in place after it was abandoned. I very much hope that it will be put back into place in the future because of the difference that it made. I think we've already heard about the values that Frances has demonstrated throughout her life, those values of commitment, particularly to those who need the support that is their due. And I would say I've particularly seen that when it comes to low-paid women. I'm absolutely delighted that we're going to be working together on eradicating the gender pay gap, still far too large, actually a pay gap that grew last year, and who better to draw on for expertise on how to eradicate that gap than Frances, the true expert but a committed advocate as well. Frances is someone who doesn't complain, she does. She's someone who doesn't divide, she brings people together. I think she embodies our city's values of tolerance, support for each other, and always recognising we can achieve more together than we ever can apart. Of course, the fundamental value of the trade union movement. So how wonderful to have you now as one of those who has the freedom of our city. Thank you very much, Frances. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You can see how well deserved this freedom is. So may I invite you please up on stage. I haven't got my props. I believe they will be handed to me to present to you. But I would now like to present you with the scroll and the freedom of the city. Please come up. Here we are. And it's being photographed.
Deputy Lieutenants, Lord Mayor, City Sheriff, Honourable Recorder, Under Sheriff of the County, Councillor Susan Brown, and my very good friend Annalise Dodds, MP, Shadow Cabinet, Equal Pay Champion. I have to say I was with women workers from the Asda supermarket who have a long campaign for equal pay, and they were so delighted that you are championing this, Annalise. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, or as I prefer to say, sisters, brothers, comrades. Just before I took up the reins at the TUC, my predecessor gave me one of the best pieces of advice that I've ever had. He told me that when it comes to my speech making, the shorter I am, the more popular I become. So just a few words from me, but they are nevertheless heartfelt. First of all, thank you to everybody that I've mentioned and to everyone serving on Oxford City Council. To my lovely daughter, Hannah, and also my great friend from Transport and General Workers Union days, Bridget, who are here tonight. And a special thanks to all the staff who've worked so hard to organise this event and to maintain this beautiful building. It's an absolute honour to be with you here and to receive this honour from what is, as we've heard, my hometown, because I was literally born at home on Masons Road, Wood Farm Estate, and yes, my dad did work on the line at Cowley where he was the T&G steward, and my mum worked at Elliston's department store for old-timers who remember that, and later she worked for the NHS at the Churchill Hospital, and she was so proud to do so. I owe an awful lot to my schooling, not least at Wood Farm Infants and Juniors, and to all the teachers there who instilled in me a love of learning that stays with me to this day. I still remember my head teacher at the time, again, if there are any other old-timers here, Miss Cordingley. And on St. Patrick's Day, she encouraged every kid of Irish heritage to climb up on that stage and show off our green ribbons. So Oxford, when I was growing up here, was also always a proud union city, and I believe it still is today. I count myself lucky to have been a teenage trade unionist during the 1970s. I had friends at Ruskin, the Randolph Hotel, Blackwell's bookshop. Some people may remember things got lively. And they were young people who set about what we like to call in the trade union movement, stirring up good trouble. I made a few efforts myself at an Oxford college where I was the worst service waitress in the world. And also, as we've heard, somebody's been telling tales at Marks and Spencer's, where I did work with the wonderful, absolutely wonderful Val Smith. And as we know, much later Val became a Labour councillor, absolutely dedicated to decent, affordable housing for all. And Val and I joined the Shop Workers Union, and we set about our own amateur organising campaign, it has to be said, with mixed results. But I want to thank Oxford for teaching me the value of friendship at work and of sticking together. Oxford for me has always been a centre of innovation, whether that's electric car manufacture or whether it's the life-saving work of the NHS. And never more so during the pandemic, when we all did really learn the true value of labour. We witnessed who really keeps this country running. And that's why I have to say it is an absolute pleasure to share this evening with Helen and the BRC. For me, representing key workers during that pandemic was one of the most important things of my life, I think. You know, we're talking about nurses and care workers, transport workers, delivery drivers, shop workers, local government officers, and many, many more. They all cared for us, and I believe it is vital that we care for them. There is no doubt that if it wasn't for the trade union movement, and the essence of trade unionism is collectivism, this was achieved together, that if it wasn't for the union movement, we wouldn't have had that furlough scheme, we wouldn't have had health and safety national standards, and we wouldn't have been able to save well over 10 million livelihoods, protecting jobs, protecting safety. And I'll be honest, after the pandemic, I believe that there would have to be real change. You know, that we only got through the pandemic together because of the courage and solidarity of so many key workers who put their health on the line, sometimes their lives on the line, to keep the rest of us safe. Surely there could be no going back. That's what I believed and hoped. And I think it is perfectly possible and realistic and right that we should say, whatever our race, whatever our religion or background, everybody should be entitled to a decent job, enough money to bring up a family, and enough time to spend with the people we love. Everybody should be entitled to respect and dignity at work. Very famous Irish trade union leader, Jim Larkin, once invoked what he called the power of divine discontent, that we should not accept our lot. We certainly should not accept poverty or inequality. Instead, we should strive for a better life for everyone. And what gives me hope is that cities like Oxford keep striving. The people of Oxford have always led the way, for a clean environment where our children can grow up and breathe, for decent social housing, and for a real living wage. Trade unionism and community organisations so often are the glue that holds us together. We know that there is no greater gift than freedom, the freedom to organise, the freedom to take care of each other, and the freedom to stand up for our rights. So thank you for everything you do. Thank you for my freedom. I am very proud to be an Oxford girl.